So why do you wear your emotions on your face? Well, it helps us interact with other humans better. Can you tell if a dog's happy or sad? Yes, they wear their emotions on their entire bodies. Okay, cats are the same way. You can tell if a cat's happy or a sad cat. My daughter's math tutor has a cat. It's a pretty kittenish kind of cat, so it's kind of fun. You'll be sitting there, and all of a sudden you yak, and it attacks. So I grab its head and go, kitty, 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 and it doesn't like that. But then a few minutes later, it comes running around like, okay, try it again. Goink. Then it runs away. Then it comes, pokes its head around. Oh, really? And it's like, does the cat enjoy playing? Yeah. Yes. And if anybody's ever a old Bugs Bunny, I will hug it and squeeze it and call it George. So I always do that with cats. Kitty, kitty, and you pat them on the head. Anyway. So when you think about what humans are doing, humans are forming concepts. So I made a little slidey thing here. Hold on. Forgot to download it. My Google Drive is getting very cumbersome. Sure. Mm-hmm. I don't think so, because it was the behavior of the operator that made it more interesting. Yeah, but is it possible, if you only see 4 blue balls, to randomly pull 3 out? No, because if you're just reaching into the box at random and pulling something out, and it squeaks, then you say, oh, everything squeaks. But if I reach in, pull out a blue one, a box of yellow, and I reach out, pull a blue one, I reach out and pull a blue one, you're like, oh, the blue ones squeak. You see, it's easy to understand in us as adult humans because we have this thing called language. But does the baby have language? Not yet. But does the baby understand what you're saying? That's what's weird. Babies understand what you're saying. My daughter was about this age, a little bit older because she could talk a little bit. We were watching the movie Garden State, and she's sitting there playing with us, and it's time to go to bed, and she goes, "That's shit, Daddy." Because they cuss about every third word in that movie. And it's funny because she not only picked up the word, because we don't cuss around the house, but the context and the appropriate usage and everything. So they're absorbing all of this information when they take. Okay, so go back to memory again. Okay, is memory on one of these? Brain forms range of stimuli produce similar responses. Okay, so when we go back, if we go back to memory, let me go back here real quick. I'm just trying out different stuff here and see if it works better. When we talk about memory, how does memory work? What to remember in the short term? Well, we don't remember attention, but attention is what is short-term memory. Yeah. Chunks. We remember semantic chunks. We can only remember very short amounts of semantic chunks because semantic chunks are noise. Where is your short-term memory in your brain? Where is your brain's RAM? Not the hippocampus, that's long-term storage. Why on earth would your short-term memory be stored in your frontal lobe? For what? Okay, what's the frontal lobe used for? You're right, you're on the right track, but... Well, I'm going to write, yeah. It's a choice of behavior. Remember, your frontal lobe is how you choose to behave. Your frontal lobe is how you choose to behave. So your behavior is coming from the frontal lobe. The prefrontal cortex is how you choose to behave. We talk about there's kids with a disorder called impulse control. Okay, impulse control, if you ever work with little kids, they're really frustrating to work with because they get upset and they reach over and just smack the kid next to them. Well, why did they do that? And they're like, I don't know. And do they really know why they did it? No, they just have. So what should you start to develop? Impulse control. Okay, if someone has a deficit in impulse control, whatever they think, they do. And so what you can do is by learning, anybody know what part of the brain? We talked about it. What hemisphere is impulse control? The left is a activation, so it's the right side is inhibition. So the right prefrontal cortex is telling you, wait, don't do that, wait, don't do that. And the left sides go, 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 go. And when someone has impulse control, there's too left and not enough right. And as a result, they just kind of act on their impulses. And they act on their limbic system. They get angry, they hit. They get upset, they cry. 2-year-olds. There's no impulse control. They are impulse machines. But that's what's actually nice about them is they don't have a lot of continuity in their behavior. You can easily distract them. Once you get to know them, you can distract what they're thinking because whatever they're thinking is how they're acting. They don't have much of a past in their consciousness. So you can easily dissuade them, and what they were thinking a minute ago is done. And can you say, well, wait till later and we will? Fill in the blank for the kid that wants to start and throw a temper tantrum. No, because do they have a later? No, they have now. Yeah. So, yeah, it's difficult. Okay, so how many chunks can your short-term memory hold? Yeah, average around 7, but 5 to 10 is normal. Okay, if you have really good attention span, you have more than 10. I wanted to go to the computer lab today, but the office said I can't. I want to do the NBAC test with you. The NBAC test is, can you remember multiple events over a period of time? And it's fun watching people struggle with this. I'm terrible at it myself. Okay, but we could. I wanted to go test that. It's called the NBAC test, but we couldn't do it because the computer lab, all the computers aren't set up. So what's long-term memory then? Okay, so there's semantic. But semantic exists in the short term. Do you remember all the details of everything that you know? All the time. Do you? So yeah, yesterday we went on a nice bike ride. We went out, it was too muddy to go mountain biking, so we went on a road ride. We park over by Morena and Friars, right by the Starbucks there, and then we rode down to South Mission because the waves are epic right now. We rode up the boardwalk to Tourmaline or Law Street, and then went all the way to Bird Rock, and then went up Nautilus, and then around and came back to the Starbucks. Nice 20-something mile ride. It was super, super beautiful. As we're going, my buddy Ken, who is a PE major, exercise science, but he calls himself a PE major, goes, why is there so little sand here and so much sand down at South Mission? So immediately I scroll through the Rolodex of teaching earth science and talk about sand migration. But why is the tide so high when those storms? I'm like, okay, fine. So we explain tidal movements and sand migration and the benefit and detriment of seawalls. That was an exciting part of the conversation. And he goes, well, how do you know all this stuff? Like, well, I taught earth science. So wait, do I need to know all this stuff now? But I retained all this useless semantic information. And the fun part about retaining lots of useless semantic information is no benefit to the world whatsoever at all. But can I use it to help keep water out of my pool? Yeah, when it rains really hard like this, guess what happens? Well, the pool fills up. We like the pool filling up, free water. Woohoo! We don't like runoff into the pool. Because what does runoff bring into your pool? Bacteria. Dirt, I can filter out. Bacteria. Yeah, I hate chlorine. We have saltwater pool. Right now, it's not quite so salty, but it'll get back there as it evaporates out. But we don't want runoff because the runoff causes bacteria. And bacteria can cause algae blooms and all sorts of nasty things to happen in your pool and skin rashes. And Anyway, so the idea of understanding your science does have practical application twice or 3 times a year in San Diego. The really heavy rain's not going to come till this afternoon when the actual edge of this is just the preliminary stuff. The front is going to move through this afternoon. Then we're going to see some rain. Maybe 2-3 inches, so we should be pretty good. I haven't looked at the forecast. That's just based on our meteorological estimates. But so what do we do with this useless information that my friend and I gather? We don't store it necessarily. We understand the patterns that it has. Your hippocampus forms patterns. What's the simplest form of patterns that your hippocampus forms? How do you find your car in a parking lot? The grids. Yeah, you have things called place cells. Yes, these place cells tell you where you are. You have time grids. They tell you when. You also have face cells that tell you, yeah, who. Where, when, and who are all automatically encoded into your brain. Your hippocampus has cells that form these immediately. Why on earth would we care who we were with when something happened? Why do you remember faces? But why do we pay too much attention to people? Well, not everybody does pay attention to people. Some people don't recognize people at all. So you're going to recognize someone who you've seen a lot more often. So in a very large crowd, that'd be really fun to do this experiment. In a really large crowd, have if I go into a large crowd and have someone just take a quick picture of it with the GoPro, the photographs with the GoPro are crazy, like 12 megapixel images that come out of that stupid thing. So if I go in the middle of a large crowd and do a Where's Waldo and take a large picture, if I'm in the crowd, could you find me faster than in a large crowd if I'm not there? Yes. How? You scan all these faces. You staring at my direction for a long period of time. I can't say you're actually looking at me because you could just be. Anyway, but my stupid face, because my hair is exactly the same all the time, I would instantly recognize you would recognize me significantly faster after exposure to the class, versus if you just said, okay, here's a picture of someone, pick them up out of this lineup. The more familiarity you have, the faster you recognize the who's. Yeah. Yeah. These are the master cells. The master cells are in the hippocampus. What's the other word we use for them? You just said it a few minutes ago. Nodes. We also call them cues or pegs. Nodes, cues, and pegs. They all mean the same thing. A peg is much more of a cognitive term than a node or a cue. Cue is much more behaviorist term. Good morning. Okay, and a peg is much more of a cognitive term. I'm going to write up a memory peg up here, which is kind of stupid, but pizza pie can only soothe digestive constipation. Please make the junk come cleanly through quickly. Precambrian, Paleozoic, Cenozoic, Ordovian, Silurian, Devonian, pizza pie can only make. Hold on, I had it. Pizza pie can only make. Mesozoic, Triassic, Jurassic, Cenozoic. Pie can only make. Oh no, I screwed it up. I've had it for so many years. I had it right the first time. What are those? If I can, I'm losing it. Okay. Setting right now. Official date. Recorded. Pizza pie can only soothe digestive constipation. Please make the jump. Okay. Pizza pie can only soothe digestive constipation, please make the young cells moving through quickly. I missed the word. Precambrian, Paleozoic, Cenozoic, Odovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, Permian, Mesozoic, Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, Cenozoic, Tertiary, Quaternary. Boy, was that so hard. I'm exhausted now. What are those? Geological periods and eras. So one of my roommates in college had these for the Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle. We actually wrote it on the board. Don't live with pre-med people, by the way. We actually wrote it on the board. We drew it on the wall. So they had this big citric acid cycle. They had the anaerobic cycle on one wall and the photosynthesis cycle on another wall. Turns out that Sharpie bleeds through paint. So we had to paint it like 6 times. And you swear like some poor person's thinking they're going schizophrenic, like I can see that in the wall. No, you can't. Anyway, but why write that down? The pattern makes the noise of trying to remember geological periods and eras, makes the noise reduce because there's a pattern to it. What happened when I alphabetized the animal list? I remember I said this in the last class. I gave students 26 animals to remember. One was randomly sorted, the other one was alphabetized. Students remembered 24 out of the 26 alphabetized animals. They remembered about 10 of the non-alphabetized animals. It's a peg system, it's a memory, it's mnemonic devices. They're just stupid human tricks. And these stupid human tricks are really important because what they do is they show you that your hippocampus is not really remembering necessarily what's important. It's remembering things that stimulate a particular pattern. The more synchronous the activity, the easier it is to recognize the pattern. The easier it is to recognize the pattern, the easier it is to answer the question. This is the danger of using Quizlet things for studying. My daughter, she has her big bio final coming up, so the teacher gave 150 multiple choice questions. 100 of those multiple choice questions are going to be on the test. So we went through on Quizlet and went through and found all the questions and all the answers. What's the problem with just memorizing this? It's if she can memorize 150 bits of information. Well, no, that's a lot of work though. Do you remember how many can remember at a time? 7 to 10 at a time, and then you practice those 7 to 10. So that's 10 sessions of 10 at a time. Oh, sorry, 15 sessions of 10 at a time. 15 minutes each, taking a small minute break. That's a huge amount of time. What's an easier way to study? Alphabetically doesn't work, especially if it's something like biology. Because you're not going to remember, I'm trying to think of her vocabulary list to try to alphabetize it. You know, it's really hard when you start looking at consumer and climate and, you know, all these things completely unrelated to each other. But putting it into a sentence does help with the semantic information, but yeah. You have to concept map the terms together. That's what we're doing at the beginning of every class. If you've noticed that I keep taking little. Each previous class gets smaller. Like we talk about the brain, we've got 2 sentences now. Before, when we talked about the brain, I had the whole board filled up with stuff. But now when we talk about the brain, when I say electrochemical signals, how much information does that trigger? A lot. And you can even picture him with the brain scanner. You could even, all sorts of information is tied in with the electrochemical machine. 86 billion neurons. We showed his brain when it was synchronous and asynchronous. You can see it in your head because that's activating the hippocampus place cells. You can actually look up at the board and see what that looked like. What colors were they? All different colors. You don't even have to think to see that again. See how that works? So the idea is that if she tries to memorize all those individual questions, she will really suffer because it's really hard to memorize that much information because that's all semantic. But if she understands what the levels of a ecosystem are, if she understands the carbon cycle, or if she understands the nitrogen cycle, if she understands the water cycle, What can she do? There's more connections. Okay, so hey, there's a decomposer. What is it doing? Well, it's fixing nitrogen, but releasing carbon dioxide. Wow, the nitrogen cycle and the carbon dioxide cycle interact. Whoa. Okay, sorry. And then so she starts we draw them out, and we write the labels around them. We write them in different colors. Why do we write them in different colors? It's easy to remember what color they were. Her flashcards are all color-coded by topic. And it's the stuff that she's learning is relatively useless in the big picture of things. So we made a food web of the Weinert household. And Nani is officially a decomposer because she got in the trash and ate an entire Ziploc bag full of old Spanish rice. Hence her going to the groomers this weekend because she was orange. Just tomato sauce. She's all home going, look what I found! You threw this away! Thank you! Okay. Secondary consumer. Just in case you care about the food web. Okay, but what's the producers in the Weinert house? Trader Joe's. Primary level, yeah. Or we get them. Okay, that's where we buy our kale. So we eat a lot of kale. Good. Okay. So this is a lot of information because once you understand the concept, but wait a second. Isn't that how the babies figured it out? What did they figure out first? They figured out what was happening in what they were watching. They came to a conclusion about what was happening. Not that blue balls squeak, is that they were watching what the adult was doing, they were watching what the ball was doing, they were watching the whole thing. And this is a word that we didn't talk about at the beginning of the semester, but it becomes important now. The gestalt. When talking about concepts, you have to focus on the gestalt. What does gestalt mean? I remember this from the first test. Max Wertheimer? You have to say it in an angry way. It means that the whole is more than its parts. Well, that's what the gestalt is that our mind, our brain, is a lot more than just the parts of our mind and our brain. So that's why Wilhelm Wundt failed, is because Wundt was looking for the elements of consciousness. The Gestalt approach said that all the elements of the brain form consciousness. There isn't consciousness in the elements. The elements form consciousness. If you think about a car, okay? Does every little piece of the car make the car work? Well, ultimately, yes. But each part is not integral. Each part works with another part, which works with another part to make everything work. And that's why I like old crappy cars, because I like to see what's the minimal amount of stuff you need to make it still work. And try to decide whether you get an oil change before the trip this weekend or not. The problem is when you get an oil change in an old car, what often happens? Something breaks. Let it ride. Okay, sorry. I'll probably get an oil change because it's still under warranty. But the idea that the whole thing is worth more than just its parts. Okay? And that's why it's so important to pay attention to the gestalt. Concepts are the gestalt of your memory. Concepts are the gestalt of your memory. This is what cognitive psychology is all about. This is how cognitive psychology works. It studies these big pictures out of very small, trifling bits of evidence. That's why, as a scientist, I have a really hard time with the gestalt. But as a psychology major, this is how it actually works. The conflict. Okay. So, we showed you the video, right? Okay, so if somebody reminds me, I'll send the link home so somebody can, so you guys can watch the rest of it, because she goes on and there's a couple other clips of the babies are really cute. Okay. So there's a word up here called an exemplar. What's an exemplar? Well, let me go back. I'll leave this up here for a minute. I always like talking about bicycles at this particular point. Well, I can use this for an example. Let's see if you guys are writing down. So, I have a theme with all my yo-yos. They all have the same basic shape. But I have another one at home that's like a normal shape one, like it's an old wooden one like this. But which one of these is the most exemplar of a yo-yo? Which one is the best example of a yo-yo? This. Why is this the best example of a yo-yo? This one is, okay, traditional. When traditional means historically, right? So with this one, this is really nice. This is super old. This is from like the 50s. The axle's a little bit worn out, so it doesn't spin very well. But this one, this is an exemplar yo-yo. It's a really old yo-yo. Back when yo-yos first were popular, this is what they looked like. Okay, except they weren't usually butterfly, they were the other shape, but this one I can take apart and put it in the other shape, but I don't. I like it this way. But can you still see that this is a yo-yo? Except it's bigger. So does it still fit the generalization of the stimulus that's a yo-yo? But it's different. You can quantify its differences. This one is also different. This one is, it's called an ooch. I just bought it because it was called ooch. Okay? It's actually a really terrible yo-yo, but not important. But when you start looking at the differences between different kinds of yo-yos, how do you decide if it's a yo-yo or not? If it fits the exemplar. If it fits the exemplar. And when something fits the exemplar, you go, that is, and then activate that node, cue, or peg. I like to look at this from a different perspective of this way. If I look at, let's just do it this way. This is stupid, but I like it. Weinert bicycles. Okay? Is this a bicycle? What's wrong with it? Ain't got no seat. People ask me, where's your seat? You go, don't ask. It's just funny. Okay, but this is my trials bike. This is one that my friend Brian, when he passed away, his wife let me use. And it's one of those, this bike is meant to jump over stuff. So if I come in with a sling or a cast, it's because of this thing. Okay? Just because I'm jumping over stuff. So let's see, how about this one? This is a bike that actually I got for $30 off of Craigslist and been sitting up behind someone's house forever. Back in the 1990s, this was the shiznit. This was the top line. If you care about bicycles, it's got one of the original Chris King 1.25" headsets on it, which they didn't make very much of, so it's totally cool. These forks are real. They're generation 2 or the 3s. Those are 3s. Those are the old Manitou forks. Full XTR. Oh! But let me go back a little bit further. Here's my old trials bike. Oh, here's Sketchy. Sketchy was awesome. Because it's sketchy as hell to ride. So we named it Sketchy. The brakes didn't work. Had crazy significant angles on it. So the first position that your bike was is balancing on your front wheel because the seat angle was 75 degrees, this was 72 degrees. Normal bikes are 68 degrees. So you're sitting right over your front hub. It was awesome. Let's see, here's the Nimble Beast in its native habitat. Yeah, 5-inch wide tires, 4.8 actually. Here's just a collection of the Weinert bikes sitting in the yard. This one right here, her name is Rusty. She is a Raleigh 3-speed. It's got weirder looking handlebars on it now. This is my road bike. This is what I rode yesterday up Nautilus. With the shifter broke, so the shifter's mounted here. You have to jingle dangle to shift to gear. It has 2 out of the 3 speeds that still work. It's awesome. But so the more that you start looking at old bicycles, here's a better picture of Rusty. She's awesome. I bought the tires, doubled the price of the bicycle. Oh yeah. But this right here is one of the most produced bicycles in history. This is an exemplar bicycle. If I had it in actual form before I put the stupid handlebars on it, anybody would see this and recognize it as a bicycle. A Chinese company called the Flying Pigeon made this bicycle. And more of these were produced. This was actually made by Raleigh, but this same frame, same idea, same measurements, same everything had been mass produced in China and India since the 1950s. The most commonly produced form of transportation in history. So this is the exemplar bicycle. So when you see something like Sketchy or the Nimble Beast, oh, there's more Sketchy. That's Sketchy when I got her. She was completely original when I got her. Or something like this. That's not mine, just some guy let my son ride this at the beach one day. Is this a bicycle? It's a dirt track racing tire, just for the record. It's basically, it's a tricycle with one wheel in the back. That's what it is. But again, does this fit the concept of bicycle? Ish? Yeah, but it doesn't have, it's not definitely not an exemplar of bicycles. Yeah. Good. Hand cycle? Well, it's technically a hand cycle. Here's my old Raleigh Sport, and my neighbor calls this in creepy old man fashion. You can just see some creepy old guy with a bunch of dirty magazines in the back of this riding it down the street, is what my neighbor said. Like, hey, but this frame was too small, so I sold that one and got a larger one. Here's a brown version that I had. It was also too small, and I sold that one. I have a problem. Yes, Strider bikes. Those are great. Those are really good for helping kids learn how to ride bicycles. Okay, or old people who can't balance. Okay, so the idea of an exemplar, the whole point of this, the idea of an exemplar is to do what? Standard. Okay, an exemplar is an average. We're getting right to where we need to be in class right now. An exemplar is an average. It's an average. How do you form these curves? You average. These curves are formed by averages. The number that occurs the most in a normal distribution is the average. So babies, when they form concepts, what are they doing? They're averaging information. Okay, so anybody know the formula for an average? You know how to average a check, right? You add up all of the values and divide by the number of values you added up. So we did an experiment with this. We went to Palm Springs with our neighborhood. We love our neighbors. They're wonderful people. So I think this is completely stupid. So we travel together. Yes, but why would you spend money to go somewhere and just hang out like we do at home all the time? For some reason, it's more fun. Anyway, so we were at Palm Springs last summer, and not this past summer, but 2 summers ago. It was 129 degrees on the van. I took a picture of it. My wife said, quit it, because I was driving while trying to take a picture of 129 degrees on the van. That's cool. I also got -9 on the van, but that's important. So it was so freaking hot. We were just there and having a really fun time, and we went to one of the restaurants in La Quinta, little villages that we were staying in, and we said, hey, is it cheaper, because all of us have multiple children, to just average the check across the families, or is it to add it up? So Susan, who is a PhD psych at UCSD, neighbor, she goes, you calculate how much it is per person, including drinks, and I'll average it, and we'll see how it comes out. So we're talking 5 families, each of us with 3 kids. Okay, one of the people has 4, we have 2, so each about 3 kids. So what do you think happened? It actually came out almost exactly the same. But what if you have 2 people and average it? If you have 2 people, one person gets lobster, the other person has a nice watery soup, and you average it, what happens? One person gets screwed for their watery soup, and the other person gets off with significantly less for their lobster. But if you have a very large sample, this is the key, this is the important point of this. Even though at that time I was not drinking, I don't like to drink when I'm out, I like to drink when I'm home in the dark by myself. Just because I like to have someone sober just in case something crazy happens. It's just part of my socially knowingness. But if you have a very large sample, guess what happens to the average? Well, it doesn't go down. It represents. If you have a large sample, it represents the actual values. If you have a small sample, the average is not bigger. No, but you have to, so small sample, more errors. Do you think babies make a lot of mistakes? Why? Their average is based on one observation. For a lot of times, babies' observations, one thing, they conclude everything. Okay, and by concluding everything from one thing, their exemplar is that observation that they made. This is why it's really important to pay attention to how you talk around your kids. If you make racist comments around your kids, what do your kids learn? Racism. And they don't care because they don't understand. If someone says something racist around your kids, what should you say? No, don't say that. But you can say, wow, that was a racist comment because we're at the grocery store with my son and he was, 10 months, 11 months old. And as we're walking down the aisle, I'm pointing at things and telling him what stuff is. Just as you're going down, tampons, digestive jelly, all sorts of things. And the lady's like, why are you doing that? Some lady at the store. I'm like, because I want him to have a good vocabulary. She goes, he's not going to remember anything. I'm like, well, I go, Caleb, point to the crackers. He looks around, points to the crackers. Like fist bump. Okay, and I'm like, point to the cereal. He looks around, points to the cereal. So, yeah, he can't say the words, but he understands. He takes the concepts in. We walk to the meat department, like, hello, meat department. You have to talk. Why do you have to talk like Blue's Clues? Their sensory memory, their short-term memory is very slow. Should we get the map? Boots. Do you have the map? 1, 1,000, 2, 1,003. Yes. I'll get the map. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,003. Find the map, find the map. They sing a little song. As an adult, it's like death. But for the little kid brain, what is it? Perfect tempo for their brains to understand it. Blue's Clues was awesome. I love Blue's Clues. Blue's can do, you can do. And I had it for the longest time on my phone. I gotta find that. I know I have the sound somewhere. That was my text message notification. The other one was, I had a TA years ago, Daniel, who had his phone, when it rang, was the Gunther song, Ooh, You Touch My Ta-la-la. Every time he answered the phone, he was smiling. He always answered the phone with a smile, because he'd go, hi, and you could just hear it in his voice. And it's just great when the phone would ring. It's like, yeah, ooh, yeah. You just go, ew, that's funny. Okay. Okay. There's a Boots, and with that, if you go watch Dora and Boots with that song remix, it's really creepy. Okay, moving on. So wait a second. Exemplars are averages. As you become more educated in yo-yos and bicycles, and cabbages and king. I don't know why that's important. But what happens? You understand the concept more, and then you start to notice differences in the different types of bicycles or different types of yo-yos. Like, so how come I recognize his yo-yo pretty quickly? I understand, I keep up to date on yo-yo culture. I haven't been hip to the scene right now because the kids are working on these slack tricks I can't figure out, and I really don't care. But I do care, that's the problem. But so I try to, I know what yo-yos are available and what yo-yos are around. So when I saw yours, Duncan, didn't look like it had the bearing in it. It looked like the non-bearing version. But so because it's not just an average or a master cell to me, I have lots of subcategories for yo-yos. Because that's something I'm interested in. My daughter does this with makeup. She has, it's annoying. A lot of times her Poshmark money that we basically give her because my wife donates her old clothes. My daughter sells her old clothes on Poshmark and then buys crap, like her earbuds, or she gets pallets in the mail all the time. Where are you getting the money for this? Don't worry about it. She probably took out 5 or 6 credit cards without us knowing, yeah. So, right, so that's a really difficult problem because you have to understand the gestalt, the whole picture. And so, like, if I see a particular yo-yo, like one of my students had one, and he had it sitting on his desk, and I realized, oh, that's a good yo-yo. They're Chinese-made Amazon yo-yos. They're still pretty good. They don't last very long. They're not very well made. But I recognized it relatively quickly because when I was looking for one of the other yo-yos, the purple one that I have, which is actually in the car right now. But when I was looking for the purple one, I saw a bunch of these Chinese-made yo-yos and recognized the one that the student had. Why would I remember them? Well, because it's not the exemplar, but it's all of a sudden it's wisdom. So wisdom means that you tend to pay attention to things that you're interested in paying attention to. Now, I know this is stupid, but what happens is that once you develop a master cell for something, is it easy to attach more memories onto that single master cell? Yeah, and then eventually 2 master cells form, and then 4 master cells form, and eventually someone becomes an expert knowledge at certain levels of things. I always love watching Roadkill Garage. It's like a great old, the guys basically fix up a car and go trash it. It's cool. But the 2 guys are expert mechanics, and they really like old American muscle cars. And because they're expert mechanics, they half-ass things the entire time. They sort of fix it enough to go. They could probably make it work really well because both of them build very expensive, very high-performance cars in their real world. But why do they just make it good enough? Because roadkill is the answer. As opposed to fixing the brake lines properly, they're using duct tape and let's see how long it lasts. Because roadkill is the answer. But the idea is that they have so much wisdom that when they look at a particular thing, I always think of the Terminator, and then one of the second Terminator, when he sits down to the truck and the schematic of the entire shifting system opens up in his brain in the truck. Like, okay, let me see. That was the first Terminator. And he goes, okay, how does the truck work? Okay, now I know how to shift. So that's the idea, is that you have these programmed wisdom, these concepts. Once you have the concept, then you can attach more and more and more information onto it. But how come the pizza pie can only see digestive constipation got tangled up for me for a second? I just have the pegs. I understand the concept of geological time and history, but I can't tell you what organisms were what time and how many million years were what time. I can tell you the order and the names. Because all I'm left with, this is really inappropriate, but it's funny. Back a long time ago, we had a study group for all of my psych courses. And one of the young ladies in our group, she was like
super sweet, like little sweaters all the time. It's the most polite, kind, Buddhist kind of little person you've ever met in your entire life, like this tall. And we were trying to take a mnemonic devices, like the pizza pie thing, for all of the different theorists' theories on personality. It's like 351 if you take it too. And she had one, and she started giggling. Smile now and see my pisser. She didn't say pisser. And she just started giggling and turned all red, and it was hilarious. The whole study group were just so fun, so that she said it, and we were laughing about it. I have no idea what it stands for. But why do I remember the mnemonic device? Because the emotion attached to it was so funny, and she wouldn't like look anybody in the eye for like 15 minutes, and she was so shy, and it was just hilarious. Because one of the girls in our study group, I can't remember her name, Stacy, I do remember her name. She was in a all-women AC/DC cover band called Snake Pits. And she was the most ruckus, black makeup, rah, and she even was laughing when the other girls said that, because they were like the opposing opposite people in the group. And it was great because I remember the whole scene almost perfectly, but I don't remember what the details are, because that wasn't what was made that memory work. It's not what's important about the memory. The reason I remember the pizza pie one is because I had a student, Carl Slayer. He was the last student I was able to corporately punish in my class. In my class, you had to come in at lunch and do push-ups when I was a high school teacher, if you cussed in class. I said it's either push-ups or a referral, because I don't put up with cussing. And he always chose push-ups. Then I found out I'm not allowed to make him do push-ups, whatever. He goes, Mr. Weiner, I'm getting so buff being in your class. And I do them with him, of course, but his dad, at a student-parent conference, at the end of his conference, I'm like, you owe me like 40 push-ups. His dad goes, for what? I said, for cussing. He goes, really? Dad had no idea that he was cussing the entire time. But so Carl came up with that pizza pie thing. And why do I remember it? I do like pizza pie, and I was extremely lactose intolerant at the time, so the junk would come cleanly through quickly if I ate pizza. And so Carl was extremely smart, just very rough. Back in Ramona, he was called the auto kid. The two populations of Ramona, the kids they had a great auto program at Ramona High School. He was one of the auto kids. And so they're super, super smart, but how are they academically applied? Terrible. But he was super smart and did really well. It just, when it got to a test, did he care whatever he put? Not at all, because it doesn't make my car go faster. No, don't care. Different priority. Okay. Whew. 3 more minutes, take a break. So, what does this say? Each input reduces the amount of time needed to activate a master cell. So, every time you form this average, do you form it faster every time? Yes. Do you remember what we called that last class? Overlearning. Every time you learn something, every time you do something, you're technically learning it again. You're reconnecting those master cells. And it's funny because when I write that pizza pie can only assist digestive constipation thing, I only think of that twice a semester. That's it. I don't really think about the periods and eras very much at all. So, but why, at this point in class, when we talk about concepts and pegs and mnemonic devices, how come it comes back fresh? Because it applies in the concept that I have mapping for the class. Every class before class, I make one of these little slides. Sometimes I put them up here, sometimes I don't. But I put the basic ideas that I want to. I usually do this like the night before, or the 2 nights before. I'll put all the things that I want to make sure I cover throughout class. And I always structure that ahead of time so that I can say, okay, we're going to do this, and then I'll get distracted by something else, but then we'll come back and we'll do this. And then, so this little scaffold allows me to focus on what you need to know from this particular section. So why is the limbic system up here then? It has a lot to do with emotions. Pattern recognition.
I'm going to write the word S plus up here so you remember it. An S plus is a stimulus that has what attached to it? A reward. A reward. It's a stimulus, S, that has a reward attached to it. Reinforced. Yes. Okay, so it's a reinforced stimulus. So what do we pay attention to? Reinforcement, but we also pay attention to these. I'll make them in red. So this is just a different way of describing what we just did right here. We talk about this, that you recognize the difference between S pluses and S minuses in your environment. Yo-yos, are they S plus or S minus for me? S plus. For other people, they see a yo-yo sitting around. They don't even register it as a toy or as something sitting there. It's funny how people don't notice things. And this last one is that there's a really cool bike that I've always wanted, and there was one on Craigslist. I almost bought it, but it needed to be fixed. Let's see. This should come up. Images. Oh, stupid birds. Okay, so this one. There it is. CSX, or MXZ, whatever it is. This was one of the first carbon fiber mountain bikes ever made. Okay? It was crap and it broke like a matchstick because they hadn't figured out how to make carbon fiber bicycles yet. When I first got to San Diego State in the late 80s, somebody had one. I rode by them and I saw it and I tried to turn around. I chased them down to talk to them about their bicycle. It was a really cool bike. Back in the days, it weighed 20 pounds, which is super light even compared to today's standards. That's why they broke like matchsticks. That's not important. Okay, so it's a totally cool bike. So probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I said the other day, 3 or 4 years ago, I saw one of these riding by San Diego State. And seeing a functional one at this point, just mind-blowing. Okay, and I'm like, whoa, look at that. My wife goes, dude, stop looking at the girl. And I look up and there's this attractive young lady riding it. I did not even notice the young lady riding it until she pointed it out, but that's not important. I go, no, look at the bicycle. She goes, you have a serious problem. Because how come I noticed the bike immediately? It triggered that memory of meeting that person at San Diego State, and it was the matte finish too. The matte finish is much cooler. Hey, theirs looks like sketchy. These are all elevated chainstay bikes. Oh, that's the color. Classic. Most of them broke right here. Yeah, just in case you care. But I almost got one on Craigslist. This is actually totally original. This is like what it should look like when it came out of the box. Sorry. Okay, so, but it's funny because I can scroll through the different bikes and look at all the different ones and see, do they all mean something? Well, they all mean something because of my bicycle history, because of my learning history and the conceptual understanding that I have for them. Okay.